So welcome everybody to our open house, our community drop-in meeting, virtual drop-in meeting to learn more about the US 70 East Corridor study and the two alternatives that are being shared with the community at this point in the study. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to Anne. Please remember that as the presentation is being given to us, that we would love for you to drop your questions in the chat. Please feel free to open the survey that has been linked inside of the chat. And your feedback about the design, about the alternatives, should be submitted via the survey. Questions about what you are learning about these alternatives and about this presentation, we will gladly accept and attempt to address through this presentation. But if you could leave those in the chat, that would be great. I'll be moderating and including those questions. Since I know the slide deck and y'all don't, it makes it a little easier for me to pause the presenter and weave in your questions. Any questions that we do not get to during the presentation, we will do our best to answer after the presentation concludes. And of course, this recording will be made available on the project page once we are able to edit that. So that should happen by this week. All right, so take it away, Anne.
Thanks, Adele. First of all, welcome. And I really appreciate the opportunity to come to you today to talk to you about what the study team has been doing with regards to the US 70 corridor study. First of all, I'd like to introduce some of the people that may be speaking or answering questions today. First of all, I'm Anne Lennart-Redmond. I'm project consultant project manager for the study. On the line, we also have Trent Moody, who leads our traffic, Weston Murphy, who is our roadway lead and in charge of the alternatives development, as well as Elizabeth Oliver. She's a planner at STV. And you all know Adele, she opened the meeting. Also with us is DCHC MPO representation. We have David Miller, who's the PM on the project, and Doug Placzynski, who's the MPO director. I also want to acknowledge some of our core technical team member partners, Go Triangle and NCDOT, who have helped us along the way in preparing for the study. At the direction of the DCHC MPO board, the US 70 corridor study was started, and STV was hired to look at a 4-lane boulevard option for the US 70 corridor. So today, the study team is presenting 2 alternatives for your feedback. We have alternative 1, which is a 4-lane boulevard section, and we are also presenting alternative 2, which is a 4-lane boulevard section with parallel routes. And Weston Murphy of our team is going to provide an overview for you as part of this presentation. We're also looking for feedback on several opportunities for trail and greenway connection crossings across US 70. And please note that as we gather feedback from these alternatives, we will be developing a preferred alternative or draft plan. And based on feedback today, we can take components from each alternative. So please tell us what you like and what you dislike about each alternative. As part of the study process, this is a graphic. We came out to the public back in December and gathered feedback on our first series of workshops. We provided some background information and gathered input from all the stakeholders as to what their visions or needs for the corridor are. And here we are, the study team is bringing 2 alternatives to the public to get some input and feedback before we go back and develop a recommended alternative. So we are here where the orange arrow is. In the last round of outreach, we had several key takeaways. US 1 is a vital commuter corridor. It serves as a distribution connectivity route for freight and goods movement. It's a vital connection to Raleigh-Durham, as well as being a commuter corridor. And vehicular congestion is a concern. We heard that there is a need for more multimodal transportation options within the study area and more accessibility to transit. We also heard that there's the impact of the new upcoming developments is pushing infrastructure past the ability to serve residents well. It's a rapidly growing area. We also heard that there is support for a freeway option for the US 70 corridor. Just to remind everyone, our study area, it's roughly 4 miles. It's between the I-885 East End connector to the north, approximately all the way down to the county line. With regards to bike and pedestrian infrastructure that's currently in the area, this map shows where there are the existing bike and pedestrian trails in the area in blue and green. As you can see within our study area, there is very limited amounts of opportunities for bicyclists and pedestrians to travel along US 70 or cross US 70 safely. But DCHC MPO does have some improvements in their comprehensive transportation plan within the area. For instance, there's a paved greenway proposed near Lick Creek, Copperleaf Parkway area, as well as in the Briar Creek Trail by East Fork Creek to the south. These are a couple of heat maps showing the existing bike and pedestrian activity within the area. It's taken from streetlight data. And so it's kind of like heat mapping. The red areas are where there's higher levels of bike and ped activity, and yellow lesser so. What we learned that there were low volumes of bicyclists and pedestrians crossing over US 70 today. And most of the bike and pedestrian activities are centered around the Angier Avenue, US 70 intersection area, as well as South Miami Boulevard and Sharon Road and Mineral Springs intersections. And the future development that will only increase demand for bike and pedestrian facilities in the future. As far as existing transit routes, the fixed routes are mainly within the study area along Angier Avenue today. There is no fixed route bus service along US 70 today. And US 70 has been identified as a second tier bus rapid transit corridor from a FAST study done back in 2021. However, there are no BRT improvements planned in the current, in the 2050 DCHC MPO Metropolitan Transportation Plan. There's also a future Route 200 from Durham to North Raleigh. That's a study that's about to be underway. It's in the feasibility study. So there are existing some future bus routes plan service in the area in the future. We took a look at what the existing traffic conditions along US 70 are today. And in general, we kind of rate them from level of service A, B, all the way down to F, where A is the best acceptable level of service, and F is failing. And as you can see, that in 2019, in the peak hours, that there are a lot of issues associated with congestion and level of service at each one of the intersections today. And we had done a 2050 traffic analysis that showed that most intersections in 2050 will operate at a level of service F overall, with substantial queuing throughout the network. When the study team developed these alternatives for this 4-lane boulevard section, we made several assumptions. We decided that we were going to use innovative intersections to relieve congestion. And for both alternatives that are going to be presented today. Now, alternative 1, the 4-lane boulevard section, we also assumed that there were going to be no bridge structures at the intersections. Everything was going to be at one level. But with alternative 2, We also use the innovative intersections to relieve congestion, but we did introduce bridge structures at Pleasant Drive and at the future Glover Road extension. Both alternatives incorporate multi-use paths and provide bridge opportunities to cross US 70. Weston Murphy is going to talk a little bit more in detail on each of the alternatives and the innovative intersections that we are using along the corridor. They're median U-turns, which eliminates left-hand turning movements and reduces delay and shorter wait times for vehicles traveling along US 70. Median U-turns are cost-effective in comparison to adding additional lanes to increase capacity in general. And it improves vehicular safety by reducing conflict points. This is a schematic of how to navigate a median U-turn. Through the elimination of left-hand turns and pedestrian signal enhancements, it makes it safer for bicyclists and pedestrians to cross US 70. To make a left turn from US 70 from a side street, vehicles would have to go through the intersection and make a U-turn before turning right onto the side streets. Eliminating left turns, again, makes it much safer for both bicyclists and pedestrians.
And if you could pause here and go back, there was a question about seeing lots of grades assigned based on traffic flow. And I don't know if you or Doug would like to address what's in the chat.
Okay, let me see. Where is the chat? Hold on.
The question is, I see a lot of grades assigned based on traffic flow and predicted traffic flow. Are these equivalent grades for pedestrian, bicycle, and transit flows? If so, how are those balanced with single occupancy vehicle flow? And that could be any team member that takes it.
Okay, I'll start off, but I'll allow Trent Moody to chime in here. But basically, these level of service is for vehicular travel along US 70. And I don't know if Trent, you want to chime in a little bit more. I know there was consideration for bikes and pedestrians in developing the alternatives on these innovative intersections, but it's not reflected in these particular grades.
Right. It was more of a qualitative look, I believe, from a bike and pedestrian standpoint, and in relation to their comfort. Of course, with median U-turns, as Ann was mentioning, they do reduce the amount of conflict points. You no longer have left turning vehicles crossing, marked crosswalks with pedestrians. So it makes the pedestrian crossing much safer. There's also ways to incorporate signal timing into the crossing as well through leading pedestrian intervals, which would allow the pedestrian to enter the crosswalk sooner, such that the drivers are now aware of their presence in the crosswalk to give them a bit of a head start. So there are some design components that can improve pedestrian comfort and safety with these types of improvements.
Another question here, Trent, was that it? I didn't want to cut you off. I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. We can move on.
Another question was with the new 885 connector, the grade at Pleasant Drive in 70 should be lower during peak times. So I don't know if there's any commentary that could be shared about the grade at Pleasant Drive in 70.
Correct. As Ann mentioned, that we did use the base year of 2019 as our starting point that is reflective of these quote unquote existing conditions. Maybe base conditions may be a better relay of what's being illustrated here. So that would be prior to the 885 connection. The struggle with this has always been having reliable data with the pandemic. So we really have went back to 2019 as kind of our starting point for a lot of our data that we've pulled to date.
Another question about this is, were traffic circles considered as an alternative to left turns or U-turns?
Certainly, and I believe the last slide that was was flashed before we started the questions was there were some roundabouts, and those will be incorporated there into combinations of median U-turns and what are called bow tie intersections. So the roundabouts there on the side street kind of replicate a bow tie, from that standpoint. So the roundabouts are more on the side streets, whereas the volume on 70 would not be conducive such to process traffic at a roundabout on the main line itself.
Okay. And with the boulevard design, what is the level of service for US 70 in this East Corridor for 2050?
There are segments that still do perform, there are intersections that do perform at LOSF. However, by and large, you'll see in future slides here that the travel times do improve. When you look at it from a corridor perspective, there are some signals that somewhat meter the traffic that allow other intersections to operate at more improved and less delays. But there is still some complications with the amount of growth that is being projected here with the 4-lane boulevard concept.
And I think next to last question here, are median U-turns permitted in a roadway that is freeway rated as a section that feeds 885?
I'm not sure if I understand the question clearly. However, if the roadway were classified as a freeway and went to a freeway design standard, there would be no median U-turns. There would be no at-grade intersections there. So the segment here is basically a boulevard transition point between the freeway as 885 is approached.
Thank you. And I think last question is, what is the proposed design speed limit?
I'll let Weston confirm this, but it's 45 miles per hour, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, thank you so much. And we'll continue on with the presentation. Thanks so much for those dropping your questions in the chat. That's been really helpful. For the questions that are a little bit bigger and more philosophical, we're gonna wait until the end of the presentation. And I will interject the questions that are about the specific slides as we go.
Okay. As Trent mentioned, we did take a look at travel time savings and comparing against the 2050 build alternative for alternative 1 against the no build. And we see in general, the innovative intersections improvements yield lower travel time speeds or travel times and savings and higher speeds along US 70. And due to the diversion of local trips off of US 70 to the parallel roads for alternative 2 would even show even shorter travel times and higher average speeds along US 70 than alternative 1. And with this, I'm going to start to transition the presentation over to Weston Murphy, who's going to walk through both alternative 1 and 2. So with that, Weston.
Sure. So first, we're going to look at the typical sections. So this is the same typical for both alternatives along US 70. So you have 2 lanes each way, and you have a 9.5-foot grass buffer between the multi-use path and the edge of travel of the road. And that's with 10-foot multi-use paths along both sides of the corridor. So you can get the next slide. Yep. So this is just on the alternative 2 where we have the parallel roadways. We reduced that grass buffer to 4.5 feet since it's a lower speed roadway, and we still have 10-foot multi-use paths on both sides. And then I'll start to share my screen here to show you the concepts.
Yep, I stopped sharing.
All right. All right, so here we're going to start at the northern end of the corridor. Here's the East End connector. You got 885 here. We got Lynn Road. We got Pleasant Drive up here and down here. And we also have future Lynn Road extension up there. And you can also see here, these white areas are the future developments coming in. Also note that this yellow shade is your multi-use path or sidewalk. So I'll go through how to navigate this intersection a little bit more in detail. So if you're traveling south on US 70 and you want to take a left onto Pleasant Drive or Lynn Road here, you would go past the intersection, like mentioned before, and you'd use this U-turn to then take a right turn onto Lynn Road. And the same thing going the opposite direction, you would use this U-turn to go left onto Pleasant Drive. And then if you're on the side roads and you want to take a left, so you're coming up Pleasant, you would go through this intersection, use the roundabout, come around here and take a right to go north on US 70, and vice versa. If you're going down on Lynn Road here, use this roundabout to go south on US 70. And we've also added these crosswalks there for bikes and peds. Like mentioned before, it's much safer for bikes and peds to cross this type of intersection compared to a traditional intersection. You have a lot less conflict points because of those left turns are no longer there. All right, so I'll continue down the corridor here. Here you can see that future Lynn Road extension coming in with the future Glover. This intersection that showed, but it will be at grade, all the same level intersection. And then here we put in some bulb outs. So these are to access these businesses on this side. So you're driving south on US 70 and you want to get over to JJ's Fish and Chicken. You could use this U-turn to access the business of that side, and vice versa, coming up the other way, you use this U-turn to access this side of the road. So here we have Sharon Road and we have Miami Boulevard here, and also Angier along the bottom of the screen there. So this is one of the trail connections that we're proposing in green. Up here is the tie to the future Lick Creek Trail. And down here along Miami, we're tying to existing multi-use path here at the elementary school to Page Branch Creek Trail. And we're also showing 3 different pedestrian bridge options on this concept. So these bridge options could go either on this concept or on the next concept that we'll look at. But we don't intend to build all 3 of these bridges. We just are going to build one of these, and we want to get your feedback on which ones of these you would use, which ones you want in this area. Just trying to get an idea of what the public wants. So I'll now go through how to navigate this intersection here at Miami. So it works just like we saw before with the median U-turns. If you're on US 70, you go through the intersection, use the U-turn just both ways. Yep. It's a little different on this road here. We don't have a U-turn here. So instead you would go right through, take a left onto this little side street, and then take a right onto US 70. And it works the same with the median U-turn if you're going south. All right. And I'll also point out here is an existing bus stop. It's the only one that shows up in our project limits here. So I figured I'd point that out as well. All right. I will continue down the corridor here. All right. So here we have Copperleaf Parkway. We got Hensley Road. We got Sanders Avenue here. And this is where Angier comes and tees up into US 70. So at Copperleaf, we're currently showing a green tee with this option. The way a green tee works is you're not allowing left turns into Copperleaf, but you do allow the left turns out. And it's called a green tee because the southbound direction here, it always stays green and they never have to stop. Just this direction gets stopped to allow this left turn to come out. And we put in a U-turn here because if you're in Hensley here and you can't take a left out, you would need to take a right and use this U-turn to go a left onto US 70. And in this option, we're showing a mid-block crossing here in between our two bulb outs. So this is a safe way to cross with there being a signal on either side. And this could be incorporated into either option. And we'll move down to the Angier Avenue intersection. This works just like the other median U-turns going through the intersection, using the U-turns to replace the left turns. And same thing on the Y lines. You would use these roundabouts to replace the left turns at the intersection level. And this ties into the future development with the roundabout here. And this, yeah. We'll continue down to the last sheet here. So here we got Leesville Road, and here's the future Leesville Road extension that we bring into a roundabout across the street from Page Road. So this works very similarly to the other median U-turns that we looked at. There is one minor difference here. As you go through, you notice there's no U-turn on this side. So instead of using the U-turn here, which we didn't put in due to the proximity of this interchange, you would actually follow the green here, just take a right, use this roundabout, and do a left in that fashion. And you could do the same thing with blue. Instead of using this U-turn, you could use this roundabout to take the left. You kind of have multiple options there. All right.
All right, we've got a few
Yep.
questions in the chat if you're ready.
Sure, yeah, we could take some
these
questions on the first concept.
Yeah, and there's different folks who may need to respond. But the first one is, do these designs take into consideration future development, such as the new multi-housing development coming into the Brightleaf off Copperleaf Parkway?
So yeah, we did consider all the developments that we had access to here. So we did try to incorporate our designs with the developments that are coming in.
Does the proposed design speed limit need to be such that traffic circles would not work along US 70? Is the plan to increase traffic passing the established businesses on US 70?
I can let Trent speak to this more, but I believe roundabouts don't have the capacity to be on US 70. Is that correct?
That's correct. Really the existing volumes today are such that the roundabouts along 70 would not function well, and then compound that with planned future growth would also impact the operations of roundabouts on US 70.
For the proposed peak hour speed for 2050, will this back up traffic on the freeway on I-885 and Wake County Freeway?
I'm going to try to get my bearings right here. Yeah, right. So on the northern section there towards 885, there are, in future scenarios, there is queuing at that first U-turn bulb that does back up. And I believe that is consistent with what is today, unfortunately.
Where is there an existing boulevard design in the area with the same volume? I think the person's asking for a similar design as well.
Yeah, I can't think of one off the top of my head, but we can, or go ahead.
I was just going to say, Trent, Ann, you want to chime in there? I think we may not have examples within North Carolina, but there was a few examples outside of the state.
Yeah, there was the Woodward Avenue in Detroit is an example of a boulevard section with innovative interchanges, and we can share that information. There's also another project with similar traffic volumes that are in East Lansing, Michigan. And then we also looked at the James Dodd's project down in South Carolina. There's probably 3 other, examples of similar traffic volumes in using boulevard sections like this. So we wouldn't be the first.
And the next question is, what are the traffic volumes now on US 70? And what is proposed to be the traffic volume on US 70 in the year 2050?
And I don't want to steal anybody's thunder. Is that part of the presentation, or I can't recall if there was an ADT slide or not. If not,
No, we didn't have future volumes on slide. We spoke mostly to our existing trend.
yeah, they do range. The volume is greater along the northwest side as you go inbound into Durham. I think they range from about 35,000 to 45,000, I believe, is the last historical record there of AAT. And when we were projecting volumes, we used the regional travel demand model to try to account for future growth as well as prior studies, and applied roughly a 1.5% growth rate when you look at everything throughout the US 70 corridor for growth in that area, which would result in, I believe, I don't want to speak out of turn here. Let me try to pull up something here.
Yeah, we used we looked at 2050 traffic volumes, which correlated to the regional model.
And while Trent is looking that up, the next question is, why are the side roads at 12 feet instead of smaller?
So we decided to use 12 feet on the side roads just because, well, it might be used for trucks, and with trucks being on the roads, that's a more desirable lane width. So that's the main reason that we used the 12.
Can shade trees be planted in the medians and landscape areas between roadways and multi-use paths?
Any type of landscaping would have to be maintained, and that would be something that would probably be more ferreted out in the next stages of project development. I would think that there would be some opportunities for landscaping within the buffered medians, but that's not something that the study team looked into in detail at this phase.
Will bicyclists be expected to use the U-turns as well?
There are, go ahead, Weston. I'm sorry.
I was just going to say, no, the bikes would not be using the U-turns themselves. They would be using on the multi-use path and the crosswalks. But you can elaborate on that if you had more to say.
That was by and large what I was gonna note, is that the added pedestrian facilities off board with the multi-use path would by and large carry most of the bicycle traffic. Now, someone that is quite comfortable, in road, there may be a different story, but the intention is to push more towards the multi-use path.
How will these designs facilitate the transition from higher speed roads at either end of the corridor to a lower speed environment within the study corridor?
So this would be handled the same way it would be in today's environment. So you'll have advanced warning signs, and things can be done, as far as reducing lane widths or things like that could be done with pavement markings in order to help cars visualize the change in design speeds.
Another question about the parallel roadways. Are the sidewalks really multimodal, thus allowing bicycles? If so, maybe consider renaming them to encourage bikes and other human-powered vehicles. Otherwise, bicycles are bicycles expected to ride along the parallel road?
So we haven't really got the parallel road concept yet, but I mean, we do have multi-use path alongside those. I'm not really sure what the question was there.
Maybe we'll address that one to deal when we get to
Yeah.
the parallel roads.
Absolutely. The next question was, what is the level of service for the Miami Sharon Road intersection?
Pull that up here and I'll take that question.
And then also to combine with that one, does the design improve the backup on Sharon Road in the morning at the intersection with Mineral Springs?
It does do that. You know, the level of service is improved. The delays do improve in terms of the no build with the innovative intersections. That being said, there is some metering involved with, and by what I mean is that we're running these simulations. So it's operating kind of as they would in the field. So if someone is upstream or downstream in a traffic signal being held up, the volume is not necessarily getting to Miami, but that is why the level of service may be a little bit improved as opposed to what one would traditionally believe. But the level of service per our analysis is, trying to find it in this big chart at the center intersection. Alex, I don't know if you're on the line, if you have that handy or not.
Yes, I can speak up as well. This is Alex Wiseman. I'm traffic engineer working with Trent on this project. The majority of the intersections that you see on the screen there for their individual LOS grade is acceptable. However, there are a few LOS E's and F's scattered throughout. However, as an overall system, it works a lot better than the current full movement signal.
So the center intersection that you're seeing here in the screen is operating at C and D in our 2050 simulation. So that does account for that future growth. So the center intersection there is a C and a D. The U-turns would operate at different levels of service. But that appears to be nothing worse than level of service D at this particular area. It doesn't look like on an approach.
Thank you. Are bicyclists expected to use the bridges to cross 70, and what are the plans if none of the bridges are added?
So yes, the bridges, or one of the bridges that get incorporated could accommodate a bike, but you also have the option to use the multi-use path and crosswalks at this intersection as well.
And I'll do 2 or 3 more and then we'll move along with the slides. What happens if the median U-turn lane fills up? Does it block the left travel lane?
Yeah, that would be what happens if there's enough vehicles trying to get over for the U-turn. Yeah, that would be a possibility, I suppose, in heavy traffic.
And will turning right on red lights be allowed for vehicles entering US 70? I'm concerned about pedestrian bike safety at some of those crossings. Also, will there be crosswalks for pedestrians? The gaps between the proposed crossings in these drawings look nowhere near where people would be or want to go.
From a right turn on red perspective, that is a little bit, I guess, further along in project development as you get into the design, but you certainly would have the capability to incorporate some added layers of safety, like blank out signs, for instance. It would be digital signs that could read no turn on red when a pedestrian has activated the crosswalk for that added layer of safety. So that is something that could be incorporated into the intersection design at a later stage of development.
And with regards to the locations of crossings of US 70 and how they would be used, we made the determinations within this study based on what was in the comprehensive transportation plans, connections, as well as feedback from the initial outreach. If there are areas that you feel that would require, a crossing, that's the type of feedback that we need. There were no origin destination pedestrian studies done specifically for this study. So that's the type of feedback we're looking for.
And Weston, you may just want to zoom in on like that intersection, for instance, just so they can better see the crosswalks. zoom on in. There you go.
Were there any more questions, or should we move on to the parallel road?
Yes, please feel free to move on. Thank you.
Okay. So we're back on the first sheet, 885 over here, and US 70 coming down. So this is a little different than the median U-turn intersection that we saw before. So I'll quickly go through. Well, first, I'll give you the key differences on the parallel roads. So the main differences in the two concepts are we have a bridge here at Pleasant, and we also have a bridge at the future Glover that you'll see on the next sheet. The other thing is the addition of the parallel roads. The intention of these parallel roads is to serve these businesses. And so these businesses that are now getting access from the parallel road, we would take their access off of US 70. So there'd be a lot less ride in, ride out directly on the US 70. The other benefit is it gives bikes and pedestrians a lower speed roadway to travel along the US 70 corridor without being right next to a higher speed roadway on US 70. Yep. And the other benefit of putting a bridge is it's a much safer crossing than having an at-grade crossing. So, yep. So now I'll go through how to navigate this intersection here. So if you're on US 70 and you want to get to Pleasant Drive, you just come down here and take a right onto this parallel road, and then you can go either way onto your Pleasant Drive. And vice versa, if you're coming north on US 70, take a right onto this little parallel road here and go either way. And if you are coming from the bottom of the screen here, coming up to the roundabout, and you want to get onto US 70, if you want to go south, you would take this right and use this side road here to turn right onto US 70. And if you want to go north, you would just go across the bridge, use the roundabout, and take a right going north. And same thing if you're traveling south, just in the other direction, you could take the side road there, or go across the bridge and use the same road there and take a right. All right. I'll continue down the corridor here. So here we have our Lynn Road extension now tying into a roundabout on either side of the future Glover. Here's another safe crossing opportunity being on a bridge. And just a reminder, all these parallel roads are to serve all these existing businesses and any proposed businesses that come in as well. And this intersection operates the same way as the previous concept with these little arrows here. And as a reminder, those pedestrian bridges that we saw in the other concept could be incorporated into this one as well. So don't forget to fill out the survey and provide your feedback. Here's a trail connection as well shown on this concept. And we are showing crossings at all of these intersections with multi-use path. So I'll continue down the corridor here. All right, so you can see our parallel road is now tying into Copperleaf Parkway. And we're using Copperleaf Parkway as kind of our parallel road to tie into, that would kind of act as that. You wouldn't be able to provide access to businesses off US 70 here because it's so far away. So not every business would be able to get access from the parallel roads, but we would do that as much as possible. So this intersection differs a little bit from that first concept before I showed you the green T here. It's now kind of changed to move the main intersection to Sanders. So you would have a median U-turn at Sanders. So if you wanted to take a left on US 70, you'd have to come here, take this U-turn, and then go that way, and vice versa in green. And then Angier operates the same as the other concept would. So the median U-turns like we've seen before, and using the roundabouts to replace those lefts on the side roads. And you can notice that we're not showing the mid-block crossing in this concept, but that could be incorporated if that's something that's desired. I'll move on to our last sheet here. So this is very similar to the previous concept, just with the addition of these parallel roads here tying into the roundabouts. And we also extended this Quaint Industrial Drive up to the future Durham Parkway that you see there. So I'll turn on these arrows so you could get a reminder on how to use these median U-turns and roundabouts to replace those left turns there. And that pretty much wraps up the overview on the parallel concepts. So we can
Thank you.
answer
Yeah,
some more questions if there
Yeah,
are
let's
any.
take some more questions. So one of them have sightlines been analyzed at all? The question is that alternative 2 substantially improve sightlines for turning from Angier onto 70. So we're asking about sightlines.
So no, I did not do sight distance calcs. We're not at that level of design, but we did look at like increasing sight distance just in a general sense. Like you see here that this is very skewed, and we made it more perpendicular, so that would help with your sight distance, even though we didn't go through the tedious calculations of all these intersections. And at these roundabouts, they're generally the size that they would need to be, and they do have a lot better sight distance than normal or some of these existing intersections do.
There was a question about 50 driveways being eliminated. How many access locations will remain? Are all these a secondary roadway?
So I don't think we calculated the amount of driveways that will retain on US 70, but that 50 driveways was the approximate amount of driveways we can relocate from US 70 to the parallel roads.
The next question is Angier Avenue. Oh, I'm sorry. Did I cut you off?
No, you're good. You continue.
Angier Avenue at Miami doesn't have any improvements and is already an issue. And now the parallel road will put more vehicles into this intersection. Do you have plans on any improvements?
With this concept, I don't think we're proposing improvements along Angier. I don't think that was a part of this study.
The next question is, there's at least one intersection that only has 3 crosswalks. Is that intentional? And could the design be improved to incorporate marked crosswalks at every side of the intersection in advance? Drivers struggle substantially with unmarked crosswalks.
So I guess this was the intersection you saw with 3 crosswalks. So we could add another crosswalk in there. I guess there's not really a real reason we didn't show that. We just figured it may not be needed, but that can definitely be incorporated.
Why isn't there a light at Copperleaf U-turn?
There should be. I think that's just a mistake. We should have a signal symbol here. That's a good catch.
Can you please explain how 70 Miami Sharon Road would improve with either of these alternatives? And I think they're concerned about the left U-turn still being choke points.
So concerned with coming through here and these U-turns backing up into the through lanes? Is that the concern? Or?
That's as best as I could make out from the question as it was listed.
Yeah, I mean, I can let Trent speak to the traffic, but I think this innovative intersection does handle the traffic better than the existing conditions would. It may not be the same as a freeway, but it definitely is less impactful than that would be. I could let Trent expand onto that.
Right, that's correct, Weston. And I guess the other thing to bear in mind is that these signals that you're seeing are much simpler phased. So they are essentially two-phased signals to allow east-west to go together as one phase and north-south to go together in one phase. You no longer have to give dedicated green time for left turns and stop the opposing through movements. So the simplification of those signal phases allow for more throughput, more vehicles going through the intersection. And we've also designed this to understand that the queuing could occur and had certain through lanes flow into these U-turn lanes, so drivers could pre-position themselves and then still also be able to be on the outside lanes to get through. So you do kind of see some of these through lanes flow into the U-turn lanes and left turn lanes at this intersection here.
Will all these roundabouts slow overall speed of cars in the area? And if so, is this plan technically more safe for cycling and pedestrians in those areas versus alternative one?
In terms of the roundabouts, they're by and large, on the parallel routes and or side streets. So for the so yes, they would definitely serve as somewhat of a traffic calming device, if you will, to slow speeds to enter and exit out of the roundabout and thus improve safety and the interaction between vehicles and bikes and pedestrians through the network.
A curious question overall is cost. Which of these alternatives is lower in terms of estimated cost?
Alternative one, the 4-lane boulevard.
Andrew Avenue appears to be in the study area. It is an important parallel street. Is there a reason it cannot be made into a 3-lane street with curbs and protected bike lanes?
I guess there is no reason that can't be done. It just wasn't a part of this study.
Okay, so somebody already asked about cost. Are you going to widen the lanes from 2 to 3 per direction?
No, the 4-lane boulevard is the same on both concepts. You have 2 lanes in each direction. With the addition of turn lanes, that would add a few third lanes, I guess, but the throughputs are just 2 lanes each direction.
And
we were asked to consider a 4-lane section because that is in the Metropolitan Transportation Plan. We did look at how volumes would flow with a 6-lane section with regards to a traffic diversion, but our charge was to develop a 4-lane section.
how many lights will be, and forgive me, someone used a shorthand here. How many lights will be on the WB lane and EB lane for alternative 2 and 1?
Say that again, Adele, please.
I'm not sure how the question is, but how many lights will be on the westbound lane and the eastbound lane for alternative 2 and 1?
How many lights like along the whole corridor?
I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think they're pretty much the same on both concepts with the exception of these 2 bridges that we added. So I guess you'd have 3 less signals here, 1 at the U-turn bulb, 1 at the intersection, 1 at U-turn bulb. So yeah, it's hard to answer on the fly, but it would be slightly less on the parallel road.
Thank you. And we've got about 3 or 4 overall questions that apply, I guess, to both alternatives. One is whether or not, are the results of the study going to decide which design is implemented, or will there be other alternatives?
We are hoping to get feedback today on these 2 alternatives. And we do have the ability to take certain components of one alternative over the other in order to get a preferred alternative.
And how will either alternative affect businesses in the study area?
Well, there'll be, due to the parallel road concept, some businesses will lose direct access to US 70, but they will gain bi-directional access by the frontage roads for the most part. So they remove direct access from US 70, but you get it on the parallel roads, but bi-directional. So there's a benefit to that. I don't know if there's anything else anyone else wants to add.
No, I think that's the main benefit to the parallel roads as far as the businesses go. But I will say, since the corridor is essentially the same along US 70, the impacts to the businesses on US 70 are essentially the same. I mean, you do have more impacts over here to some of these businesses where we grade separate. Just because you have to build up to get over US 70, you will have more impacts.
And then there was a question about BRT and any info that anyone can provide about how the alternatives facilitate bus rapid transit lines in the future.
Well, you're stealing my thunder for the other part of the presentation. I can answer it
Okay.
now, or I can.
Yeah, no, let's go through the final portions of the presentation since we're getting close to time.
Yeah, I noticed that there's been a lot of questions with regards.
Yeah, no, they're all great questions and we want to accommodate them and weave them in at the proper place so that we don't get too far past the specific points
Okay.
and images. But yeah, we're ready to go.
Okay, so I'm gonna take back control now. If you just give me a minute here. Can you see my screen? Is everything good?
Sure.
Okay.
Perfect.
Okay, now that Weston's given an overview of the alternatives, we're going to talk a little bit more about how we compared these two alternatives, what performance metrics that we used. Basically, these two alternatives were presented, were compared and evaluated on performance metrics based on the DCHC MPO goals and focus areas, mainly walkability, bikeability, transit focused. We looked at the reduction of conflicts between bicyclists, pedestrians, and vehicles. We looked at comfort factors, buffer separations from vehicular traffic, and also improved accessibility to transit. And also with regards to bus rapid transit, future transit was considered. They were both evaluated based on their ability to accommodate future bus rapid transit along US 70. And also for future bus service within the area. Environmental considerations related to the preservation of green space was considered. And the vehicular operational consideration included delay, but it also included travel time savings and vehicular speeds. It wasn't just delay we looked at. We looked at what is the travel time savings along the US 70 corridor when we compared the alternatives. So I'm going to take you, step by step from each focus group and show you how these alternatives fared. I think I skipped a slide, just a second. Yes. We looked at walkability. We took a corridor assessment based on the number of innovative intersections and signal enhancements as a metric for safety along the corridor. And we found that alternative 2, we had slightly rated slightly higher than alternative 1, basically because it had not only median U-turns to facilitate pedestrian crossings across US 70, it also produced a higher number of sidewalks and multi-use paths, which was a metric of connectivity within the area. Alternative 2 also rated higher with regards to pedestrian comfort because the parallel roads would allow for bicyclists and pedestrians to be on lower volume roads and lower speeds in the area. Very similar with bikeability. We looked at the same type of metrics. We did an overall corridor assessment based on the number of innovative intersections and signal enhancements. We looked at the amount of proposed linear crossings, trails and multi-use paths. And we also looked at the buffers for bicyclist comfort. And the alternative two fared higher than alternative one. It had 3170 feet of new sidewalk and multi-use paths in comparison to about 1500 feet with alternative one. It also had two, bridge structure connections for trails and bikes, one with the future Glover Road extension and the other one at Pleasant Drive. So with regards to bikeability, alternative two came out higher. With regards to transit, we kind of touched on this before. Both alternatives accommodate future bus service and bus rapid transit within US 70. None of the designs preclude anything with regards to bus rapid transit, such as queue jumping or other characteristics of that. But alternative two offered more opportunities for future transit and bus service along the parallel roads. So therefore, it ranked higher with regards to transit. Oops, sorry about that. Let me go back. With regards to green space, we looked at the change of impervious surface, and alternative one had at least amount of increase in impervious surface area, was a little bit more gentler, kinder to the environment with regards to green space. That was the one area where alternative one fared better than alternative two. We also looked at the impacts of each alternative with regards to stream and wetlands, and the number of whole and partial takes of property values, properties along the corridor, businesses, residential, vacant properties. We also looked at parking and right-of-way footprint. And in general, alternative one has the least amount of impacts in comparison to alternative two. And our takeaways was that alternative one, the 4-lane boulevard section, it was least impactful to the natural and human environment, and it's less costly. But alternative two had better bike and pedestrian benefits. There was more opportunities for future access to transit, and there was a higher vehicular travel time savings along US 70 with implementing alternative two. So with that, Adil, are there any additional questions?
Yeah, I think there were some overall questions about safety, connectivity, cyclist infrastructure, and
Okay.
transit options being balanced with level of service and cost. But I think your last slide may have addressed that. And of course, I want to let everybody know in our chat that there is going to be a document put together with any questions that we weren't able to get to during our time. And that will be posted on the project page along with the video of this particular meeting. The presentation slides that you just saw will also be made available to you. Any past materials that we've already collected will be on the project, are already on the project page, and any current materials will be posted up on there as well. Of course, we want to remind everybody that the online survey is in the chat. I will repost it again so that folks can know that this is where your critiques, concerns, celebrations, whatever notes you have, positive or otherwise, can also be left there. I'm trying to comb through here the bottom of the chat because y'all are a very active bunch. There was a question about how these alternatives are integrated with the NCDOT study and plans.
We were charged with basically evaluating a boulevard section, 4-lane boulevard section, and we have been collaborating with NCDOT to make that comparison with the previous study. But we don't have the information at this time to share.
Someone else wanted to know if there's a cascade analysis done. It seems that BRT, bus rapid transit routes, could substantially reduce the need for impervious surface elsewhere. So they were wondering about a cascade analysis.
We have not done that as part of this study.
Thank you. I'm trying to keep going through here. There was a question about the parallel roadways. For the parallel roadways, are the sidewalks really multimodal, thus allowing bicycles? If so, maybe consider renaming them. They just added that in the actual document, when they were looking at the cross-section view, the path is called a sidewalk and only shows pedestrians in the image. So they just wanted some more clarity on that.
Yeah, I believe that it should be labeled multi-use path for both pedestrians and bicyclists.
And anywhere that we would go with combining pedestrians and cyclists, we would have a 10-foot or greater multi-use path. And anything that was smaller, say 5 or 6 feet, would be would be a sidewalk, so it would be pedestrian only. That may not be perfectly clear between and that may be an older iteration of that typical section, but that would be the case if it was implemented.
And I'm looking, trying to see if there's one or two other ones. Forgive the time it takes for me to scroll. You just showed information about parcels impacted, so I don't want to ask that. Will we be given a comparison of design done on US 70 by NCDOT as a freeway for all to have an idea of what a freeway versus a boulevard could provide?
That has not been a part of our study at this time.
Thank you. And are the results of this study going to decide which design is implemented, or will there, oh no, I think we've already answered that question. I think that's it. I think we've gotten through the majority of what I can see here. I really appreciate everyone's time. I really appreciate, one last question. What timeline is expected to begin construction once a plan is approved by the MPO and the powers that be? If anybody knows the answer to that.
Well, I'll start, but I'll let David Miller chime in if he wants to. But basically, the steps that we're at right now is to recommend a preferred alternative to go into a plan that can be put into programming and implementation. There's no timeline right now for when this project could be implemented. It would have to go into the NCDOT spot process and be evaluated against other projects. So this is like the very first step in trying to get improvements done along the corridor. So we don't have a definitive timeline at this time.
I really appreciate everyone's patience today. Continue to look at the project page for any updates. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for being good stewards of our guidelines so that we could get to as many of your questions as possible. I'm really impressed with our ability to get this in, even though we are about 15 minutes over time. But that being said, any questions will come through the chat, and any questions that we were not able to get to, we're going to be happy to go ahead and post those in a summary document on our project page. For those of you who did register for a meeting, whether it's this one or ones in the future, you are going to get this video recording, this presentation, as well as the answers to those questions. Give us a little bit of grace on the timeline it takes for us to get through all those questions and get all the answers in there so that we can be as accurate as possible. And just know that there will not be new information shared unless someone asks a question that someone else didn't ask. and then they will, of course, get an answer we didn't provide during this meeting. So all of the other meetings will be open house drop-in style. For those of you who are concerned about seeing maps on your small screens, come look at our oversized maps and be able to talk to the folks who are on the call today in person. And so we have 3 opportunities for that. Continue to use the registration form that you used to get to this meeting if you'd like to join us for one of those in-person meetings. But just know that those are drop-in style. We're encouraging people to continue to put their feedback into the survey. Since there's so much detail, we want to make sure that we accurately assign the things you want to tell us to the right intersection, into the right portion of design, into the right alternative. Are there any closing notes that the team has for everyone on the call before we adjourn?
No, thank you for your feedback. We're really looking forward to hearing what you think. Please participate in the survey.
Thank you so much. We're all adjourned. Appreciate it.